For all the disappointment over wasted opportunities in Jurassic World Dominion, there's something I'm thankful for: the introduction of obscure dinosaurs and of feathers and proto-feathers to the general public. Now, one of the new stars has both a little-known name and feathers. I mean, of course, Therizinosaurus, a name which kids will not only recognize but actually learn to spell, and this will lead to general recognition of more dinosaurs than ever before. The Therizinosaurs are a very odd group of dinosaurs. They belong to the theropod clade, specifically the Maniraptorans, which include these guys you might recognize, and yet they violate so much of that expected bioplan, from the obvious large gut and those Edward Scissorhands to the less obvious backward shift of the pubis and weight bearing on 4 toes. Now, the reason for many of these changes is a switch to an herbivorous lifestyle. In many ways, Therizinosaurus reminds me so much of that ornithomimosaur, Deinocheirus, which also had terrible claws. For many years known only by this, we now know it likely looks like this. And you can see the mutual weirdness here. It's been a while since we saw anything from GR Toys / Haolonggood. However, without much ado came release images of a Tyrannosaurus and a Therizinosaurus. The T-Rex has 3 color variants that look good, but the anatomy and the sculpt didn't blow my skirt up, and I've really too many T-Rexes already. But I was interested in the Therizinosaurus, because I don't have a model of one at all. I did have this long ago, but I gave it away. Despite giving its name to the clade, Therizinosaurus is known only from scant remains, including the gigantic claws estimated to have been up to 50 centimeters or 20 inches. And as you can see, we don't have a lot of it, but fortunately we do have bits and pieces from many of its relatives, such as Allosaurus, Sagnosaurus, Falcarius, Northornicus, Beipiaosaurus, and Erlikosaurus. Erlikosaurus has the most complete skull of any Therizinosauride, suggesting a Ramphatheca, that keratinous beak possessed by the ornithomimosaurs. The result is a generally accepted composite that looks like this. Therizinosaurus has been estimated to reach 9 to 10 meters, 30 to 33 feet long, and 4 to 5 meters, 13 to 16 feet tall, at a length of 25 centimeters or 10 inches and a height of 17 centimeters or 6.7 inches. That makes this model 1 to 30th scale. Therizinosaurus means scythe lizard and derives from the Greek therizo, meaning to reap, and sauros, which you know by now means lizard. There are 2 color variants, this and this. I actually preferred this one, but for some reason the actual release changed to this. So I went with this, which I thought would be more colourful and hoping that GR Toys could do it justice given their past record. Now right off I have to say, it looks rather underwhelming. Now we've seen insane colour and paint applications from GR Toys before. Of course, the Carcharodontosaurus, a little less with the Dicryosaurus, and the striking Quetzalcoatlus. So a broad overview of the colour. The dinosaur is extensively feathered. The colour palette comes from this part of the colour wheel. This is mixed with a large expanse of white. Now by and large, the paintwork looks quite natural. To sum up the paint application, I have mixed feelings about it. Taken in parts, I really like it. For example here, very bird-like. And even the blend into the teal blue of the head. Here the transition from orange to the grey and white I like too. Yet, viewed in totality, there's an ineffable feeling of a lack of unifying cohesion, almost a hodgepodge of colours that don't quite tie together. But who knows, it might grow on me in time. So let's look at the detail. The pose is as commonly seen for Therizinosaurus, bipedal with hands waving about, from Peppo to Schleich. To be fair, there's really not a lot of variation I could imagine for a biped as oddly proportioned as Therizinosaurus, with such unwieldy appendages. The small skull is reflected here. And they have given it a ramphatheca. I like how it's highlighted with the purple here. The mouth doesn't articulate, which normally has the advantages of avoiding seam lines. Yet unfortunately, that's not the case here with this seam line. The facial scalation relative to the head looks too big and rough, but in fairness, the absolute size of the head is small, so these scales are actually very small too. And going down the neck, more of that downy integument. And I have to say the sculpting of the flow and the grouping of these feathers is just beautifully done. You can just see the care and effort put into them. Of course, the most eye-catching feature, the gigantic claws. Now, contrary to what you might assume about these scythes, now, most experts now think they were used to hook vegetation close rather than defense because of how fragile they would be. Still covered in keratin, one could still fantasize that it might be able to do this. While knowing it's sad, it belongs to the realm of imagination. In addition, these aren't sword blades that anything can be impaled on simply by falling on it or by being pushed into it. You can see here they're beautifully painted with a very nice fade here. We do have pieces of the unguals, but surprisingly, we only have the second digit of Therizinosaurus. Now going down, you see the really weird proportions of this dinosaur, especially in this vat-like gut, for processing plenty of plant material for this big dinosaur. Again, really reminds me of the weirdness of Deinocheirus. To accommodate this gut, an unusual change in Therizinosaurids is that the usually forward-projecting theropod pubis is now rotated backwards. You no longer expect to see the pubic boot projection. Unfortunately, I still see a bit of a projection here, so perhaps this was an oversight that was not picked up. The hind limbs are generally robust and stocky, as they would have to be to bear its bulk bipedally. In fact, it really is surprising that this herbivore retained bipedalism at all. Now down here, there are two problems. The transition from feather to scale is just too unnaturally abrupt. Even more serious are the toes. Now, one of the many unusual features of Therizinosaurus is that unlike theropods with 3 weight-bearing toes, with the first reduced to a dew claw, it actually had 4 weight-bearing toes, with only the 5th metatarsal reduced and useless. The first digit was the shortest, the second and third equally long, and the fourth smaller again. And yet, this isn't done here, instead showing the typical theropod morphology seen in T-Rex, for example. And so this is not correct. and also because of the way these seam lines just cut into the arm and leg, which is a pity because I think it's obvious how finely sculpted the limb scales are. Without a natural transition in the down and scale interface, it feels like he's wearing a hair shirt and pants. The legs are made of a very hard material, but hopefully will retain their shape and ensure continued independent standing. And finally, finishing off with the tail, I just really like the sculpt of the feathers and this black and white coloration. Now for the base. For those of you who might want the T-Rex as well, I believe that both their bases are exactly the same, which is disappointing and lazy. There's a nice heft to it. And here you can see the very earthy, gravelly detail, which is very nice. Other details include this fallen branch. And this very mossy kind of fluff, which reminds me of the Black Horse Stygimoloch carpet of moss. Very nice, although like that model, you may expect some shedding with time or wind. Now this little pool is really nice. You can see the wetness and even the bubbles. The pool is green, and you can imagine the algae giving it that color. And here you see the transition from drier to the wet pool, and it's really very good work. There's a Haolonggood branding here. In all, a very realistic representation that somehow the actual dinosaur doesn't match up to. So that's it really. Now as you may guess, I have really mixed feelings about this one. While I think the quality of the sculpt and the detail are very good in some areas, in others like the feather scale separation, they're not. And while I really like the color scheme in various regions, on the whole, it doesn't quite tie together for me. But then that's just me, and you may actually like it. And of course, I have disappointments with some of the anatomy, and juxtaposed with the incredible base, these imperfections are more the pity. I'd say that if you can get this for around US $60 and don't already have a Therizinosaurus, you might very well like this. But if you have to pay more than the GR Toys Carcharodontosaurus, and if you're particular about having the latest anatomy, you might want to wait for another offering because these are the droids you're looking for. I'll go about my business now, and I'll see you soon with another review.